All right, I'm back. Wow, what a day. What a day. There was a time, let me tell you, when discussing tariffs was probably the most boring thing you could ever do. It was like if you were talking about tariffs, like really, you got nothing else to talk about except for tariffs. That's like something that you would go and listen to Thomas Sowell talk about, the great Thomas Sowell. Now, I'm not, excuse me, I'm not throwing shade on Tom Sowell, because Thomas Sowell taught me a great deal about economics. He was no fan of tariffs, Tom Sowell. He used to go on and on about the Smoot-Hawley. I say used to as though he's passed on. He's not. He's still with us, thank God. He's one of the greatest intellectuals of our time. Anyways, thank you for joining once again. Thank you for subscribing. To those who have, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. If you're watching on X, please follow me there on X. So I wanted to talk about the obvious today. Everything going on with the tariff trade war that Trump has launched. President Trump came out and announced this. I guess it was yesterday, right? Yesterday, April 2nd, Liberation Day. And needless to say, the reaction has been very interesting and very substantial. And the markets took a tumble. We knew they would take a bit of a hit, but I didn't know it would be this bad. But but anyway, we're going to talk about it and we're going to analyze it, and I'm going to tell you what I think about it, and hopefully you learn something from it. Hopefully you glean something from it, and hopefully it's a worthwhile discussion. Once again, thank you for all who have subscribed. We got over the 700 mark finally, which is great news. And now we're going to go to 800, 900, 1,000, and beyond. Okay, so the Dow finished what? Down 1,000 something, what, 1,600 points or something crazy like that. I have to tell you, I have not seen the Dow drop like that. I don't think in my life. I mean, they say COVID had happened and 2008 was bad, but it couldn't. I don't know. I don't know what the single day drop was back in 08 and during COVID. I do remember from COVID watching Bill Ackman on CNBC just telling everyone to shut everything down because we're going to hit rocky roads. We're going to hit some tumultuous waves. I don't even know what that means, but anyway, that's what I remember from the COVID recession, if you will call it. I don't know if we actually did go into a recession, but the COVID collapse in the stock markets. But I want to talk about the tariffs. I want to talk about the effectiveness of them. I want to talk about the reasoning for them. And I want to discuss why I think Trump is doing them. It's hard to figure that out sometimes because there's a lot of mixed messaging coming from the White House. But here's what I will say. Some kind of noise happening behind me or above me. I don't know if you hear that water. Anyways, so here's the point. Trump, when he first ran, and I talked about this during the 2024 election in the fall, I kept on saying, and I was on with Mark Halperin, and I told Mark Halperin, I said, look, Trump ran not on wokeness and gender stuff, but he had to talk about all that during the campaign because that was kind of the topic du jour. But he ran in 2016 on exactly what he's doing right now. He ran on tariffs, he ran on trade, he ran on protectionism. He ran as an economic nationalist. And when you run as an economic nationalist, you get support from all the places where the jobs have left. And that's what happened. And that's why he won. He won in large part due to Wisconsin, Michigan, places of that nature, states in those areas in the Rust Belt who have been hurt very significantly by globalization and trade and the reduction of trade barriers and the increase of free trade and free flow of goods. And it has really hurt a lot of people. And when Trump ran as an economic nationalist, he gained a lot of support. And I do believe that's the reason he won. And I was saying in the fall that if he wants to win again, he has to run on these issues. Now, funny enough, I was saying this around August, and obviously had nothing to do with me. My channel was at, I don't know how many subscribers, 500 or something. Obviously, he did not hear me, but there was a chorus from a lot of people out there who were sort of his original backers, or at least the people who really understood his original mandate and his original reason for running and his reason for winning. And we were saying, hey, you got to get back to the tariffs. You got to get back to economic nationalism. That's going to win you the election. And then he started talking about tariffs again. Crazy enough, September, October. And look what happened. He won the election. Okay. So now we fast forward to April 2nd, and he enacted huge reforms in global trade rules. And I will go as far to say this. If you look back at Trump's entire first term and the time he served so far as president, this is the biggest single thing he has done in his entire 4 years and 3 months as president. You can go back and look at all the different things that he's done and all the different things that have happened, the tax cut legislation, Soleimani, and, whatever big event. There's been many of them. COVID, pulling the United States out of the Paris Climate Accord. There's been a lot of controversial things, the Muslim ban. But if you look through all of those things, all of those pieces of legislation, all the executive orders he's put into place, this is the most significant thing Trump has done in his entire 4+ years as president. And the reason for that is he is attempting to reorganize the globalist world order. He is attempting to reorganize global trade as we know it. This is something that Steve Bannon calls the rules-based international order. Since World War II, there's just been kind of an assumption that certain things are good and certain policies are good and certain policies work, namely an economic policy that is, as I say, globalist in nature, which means that there will be a free flow of goods, country to country. And while it is true that that has generated a lot of wealth and free trade has been good, it has not been good for everybody. There have been a lot of losers when it comes to free trade. And the issue, and this is why I kind of have a hard time debating this with people or explaining it, and it's why the Trump admin is having I don't want to say a problem explaining it, because they have very good people out there explaining. The Treasury Secretary is phenomenal. Lutnick is fantastic, and Trump does his job in his entertaining and flamboyant way. But it's very hard to get people to wrap their heads around the reason why these tariffs are necessary and the reason why free trade as we know it for the United States has not been working for everybody. And that reason is the people who are most negatively affected by the free trade happen to live in areas where there isn't much news coverage of them. The cameras don't really go to the towns in West Virginia and Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin. But these are the areas, and I mean, almost every other state has been affected as well. Excuse me. But the people who are most negatively affected by free trade also happen to have the least amount of influence, media influence, political influence. So Trump's victory, remember when they used to say that Trump's victory was a victory for the forgotten man or the forgotten men and women? What that means is, and you'll hear like liberals say it's a dog whistle for racism or something. No, what that meant and what that means still is that there are many people in the United States, and the same goes for other Western nations as well. But there are many people whose livelihoods have been crushed by free trade. Their towns have been emptied out, their economies have been destroyed, their lives have been ruined, and they don't get to tell that story on CNBC. They don't get to complain about it. They don't get to have a documentary made about it. They don't get to have 60 Minutes come and interview everybody about what's going on there. So you never really hear about that side of the story. Whoop. My light just went out. They must be listening. The New World Order is listening. Wait 1 second. This light, I'm telling you, from the second I got this ring light, it did not work. Okay, there we go. Pick up where we left off. What was I saying? 60 Minutes does not go to these small towns and say, hey, what do you think about NAFTA? What do you think about free trade as it exists now? What do you think about tariffs? So the only time these people can make their voices be heard is at the ballot box. And when they get a chance to vote for someone who is nationalist economically, they're going to do it. The interesting thing is, these same voters, if they didn't vote for Trump, if they had an option to vote for someone like Bernie Sanders, they would probably vote for him. Because Trump and Bernie are sort of, in a way, similar in this sense. Free trade used to be a Republican idea. Tariffs and trade barriers used to be something that leftists and the Democrats would embrace because they were trying to protect blue collar working class jobs. The Democrats were always the party of the blue collar worker, of middle class America, of unions, etc. And Biden kind of comes from that same mold, which is why you see, by the way, that Biden kept the tariffs that Trump put in place against China. Of course, you're going to hear all the Biden people going on about how this is a horrible idea and blah blah blah. I don't know if we'll hear from Biden himself, but nonetheless. By the way, to those of you who are watching, thank you for watching. Please subscribe in the right-hand corner where you see the little image of my face. I need to replace that, by the way. That's an old one. But subscribe to my YouTube channel, please, and follow me on X. So the point is, Trump ran on this issue. He really ran on 3 issues: ending forever wars, immigration restriction, and trade policy. He ran on those 3 issues. And he has doubled down on this issue unlike any other issue out there. There is no other issue where he has been so determined. I mean, you cannot understate or overstate how impactful this was. And yes, the markets are suffering. They are really, really suffering. I mean, today was a very, very bad day for the financial markets. But here's the point. Trump is not president strictly to make sure the Dow Jones reaches its record levels. Trump is not president to make sure Wall Street makes more money. Trump is not president to make sure that the economic order as we know it continues on. Now, is it nice when the stock market goes up? Yes. Is it good when companies are doing well? Yes. Does he want billions coming into the country? Yes. And all of that will happen in due time because you have to believe there's going to be some kind of tax cut coming later this year, corporate tax cut, income tax cut, whatever, some kind of tax cut and some kind of deregulation because it's all part of the overall overarching agenda. But to focus on trade and stick to trade just for a minute, the purpose of the reciprocity and the reciprocal trade deals by means of tariffs, the way he's doing them is threefold, if threefold is possible. The first is that, yes, it is a negotiating tool. Yes, you can use tariffs as a way to get what you want from other nations. Case in point, NATO countries pay a lot less than the United States does. All the other countries in NATO do not carry their fair share of the burden. I think it's supposed to be 4 or 5%. I've talked about that on the show before. It's supposed to be a certain number. Do they hit that number? No, they do not. So Trump would like to get them to hit that number, and he can use this as a stick. He can use tariffs as a way to try and get them there. So yes, it is a negotiating tactic. But what it also is a way to bring in revenue to the United States government. Because every time a tariff is levied, the United States government does pick up and collect money from whatever goods are coming in to the country. So in that sense, it is bringing money into the United States. Now, what I believe Trump may be teeing up is he may be teeing up some sort of decrease in taxation, like huge tax cut, or to try and abolish in one way or another income taxes as we know it and use the tariffs as government revenue. Now, do the numbers work out? I have no idea. I have not looked at that, so I don't know about that. I don't know. I know that idea has been bantered around. I know people have talked about that a little bit. I don't know if that's possible. But the third aspect of the tariff regime is that it helps or incentivizes companies to bring their jobs back to America. If it is too costly for them to manufacture products outside of the United States and then bring it back in, they are going to have to make them here. If the tariffs are too high and they cannot withstand it, as the markets are showing right now, like, hey, these tariffs at the levels they're at now, probably not sustainable. That's what the market's telling you. The market is spooked. The market is panicked. They're saying, hey, we are not sure we're going to be able to deal with a tax on our products at this level. So maybe it won't be at this level. Or maybe it will be at this level and they just won't be able to take it and they will bring the jobs back. Here's the thing about all this, and Scott Adams was talking about this morning. Nobody knows what is going to happen. Nobody really knows. And if anyone tells you these tariffs are horrible, these tariffs are going to destroy the economy, these tariffs are going to destroy the dollar, they're going to tank the stock market, we're going to go into a recession, they don't know. They don't know. They're acting like they know, but they don't know. Likewise, people coming on here or anywhere saying, hey, this is going to be great. All the jobs are going to come back. These are going to work. They don't know either. This is a gamble. Trump is taking a huge risk here that he hopes will pay off, that he hopes will deliver. He hopes the market will come back. He hopes that countries will come to the table to negotiate. He hopes that in time there will be deals negotiated with every single country. And another aspect of this is that he has finally learned, or he has learned a long time ago, and America is finally doing it this way. You cannot do trade deals as a pact anymore. You have to do them by individual country. Because when you do them as a pact, things get murky and it doesn't work. So you have to do it country by country. And that's what he's doing. He's going one by one by one. And they're going to call and they're going to say, they're either going to retaliate or they're going to sit down and say, hey, let's work something out. So that's what's going to happen. And the countries that want to work something out will work something out. And the countries that want to retaliate and don't want to work something out, I think they're going to have a rough time. I really do. I think it's not going to be a good time for them. So, and we saw this today, by the way. Let me see if I can pull this tweet up from Bill Ackman. Of course, everyone on CNBC is flipping out, of course. But that should be evidence that what he's doing is correct. If Wall Street and the special interests are flipping out, it might be a good thing. Let me see here. Wow, he's been tweeting a lot today, or posting a lot. Okay, here it is. Let's see if I can share the screen here. So, Bill Ackman says today, he posted this earlier this morning. My advice to foreign leaders is that if you have not already reached out to President Donald Trump, you need to do so immediately. Trump is at his core a deal maker who sees the world as a series of transactions. Based on his track record to date with foreign governments, law firms, and universities, he is a tough but fair negotiator. He loves to make deals and he loves to get things done promptly. I expect Trump will reward the early deal makers with fairer deals than those that wait to sit down at the negotiating table. Countries that respond with additional tariffs on our goods will be severely punished. The carrot and the stick writ large, big boy style. The art of the deal will soon be sold out on Amazon, but if you are running a foreign country that is now subject to massive tariffs, don't wait to read the book. Just pick up the phone, call the president, and make a deal. Just some advice from a friend of the global economy. So it's interesting to see that someone like Bill Ackman is coming out in support of these tariffs, because Ackman is from kind of the globalist Wall Street crowd. And a lot of them are not happy with it. But a lot of them also probably, they're smart enough to see the reason why he wants to do it. It may not be in their interests, but they know why he's doing it and they know why it needs to be done. You drive through some of these towns in Ohio and Pennsylvania, the Rust Belt states, drive through West Virginia. I know West Virginia is more coal than anything else, but drive through areas of Pennsylvania where all the steel plants have closed down. All the mills are closed. And by the way, if you look at a map of where all or the majority of the opioid, fentanyl overdoses are, there is a direct correlation between the towns that have lost their jobs in industry and the overdose rates. These towns did not just lose jobs, they lost dignity, they lost respect, they lost everything that made the town the town. The reason that the town was able to be successful, the reason people could have families there, the reason people could have livelihoods there, is because there was jobs and opportunities. Once the jobs left and the factories closed, everything went with it. The town disintegrated, marriages were severed, families were broken up, addiction took hold. And it wasn't just an economic price they paid, it was a social cost. And that social cost is not felt in New York City. That social cost is not felt in Los Angeles or Chicago or here in Miami. That social cost was not felt in Washington, D.C., of all places. As the trade barriers went down, the money flowed in to those areas and flowed out from the other areas. And those areas have not had a voice. Those areas do not get to raise their hand today and say, hey, I actually like this. I actually want this. This is what we elected him to do. They don't get to go on CNBC with whoever's on there. Becky Quick. They don't get to go on there and say, hey, here's my side of the story. My town has been destroyed. My town hasn't been the same for 25, 30, 35 years. And you sent us to war to fight your globalist wars, to die for your pointless crusades. You ripped the industry from our towns and our people and our livelihoods. And now you want to act like when someone comes in and tries to bring the jobs back, it may or may not happen. But when someone makes an attempt to try and reestablish some economic certainty to these areas, some economic activity to these areas, they yell and scream and squeal. How long can America go on being a country where half the jobs are laptop jobs, where half the jobs are not making anything? Half the jobs are posting things on social media. Half the jobs are doing what I'm doing right now. Half the jobs are tech jobs and service jobs and finance jobs that service other finances and promote and advertise for and market other financial instruments and companies. That's what the American economy has become. And if it weren't for the service industry, the actual service industry, who knows what some of these states would live on. The United States of America does not make anything anymore. We rely on China to make our drugs, to make our medicine. Who do we rely to make the parts for the planes that we build and for the fighter jets we have and the tanks and the artillery and everything the military uses? Who makes it all? Where is it manufactured? Where are the drugs manufactured? It should, a lot of it, be here, no? Why is it a necessity to have the most important products in our economy made elsewhere? Made, by the way, from countries who do not like the United States of America. So what Trump is doing, it isn't radical, but it's very bold. Because to say it's radical means it's out there, it's extreme. It's not extreme at all. What he's trying to do is not extreme. What he's trying to do makes complete and total sense. It just seems extreme because we've gotten so used to, again, what Steve Bannon calls the post-World War II rules-based order, where we just assume free trade is good. Why do we assume free trade is good? Well, we haven't really had to argue or make an argument for that in a long time because nobody has really challenged that orthodoxy. Nobody has really challenged that mantra that free trade is good all the time and for everyone. It's not good all the time for everyone. And it has been a disaster, an utter disaster for huge swaths of the country. They are not the financiers. They are not the influencers. They are not the tech workers and the tech moguls. They are people who used to use their hands to make things. And they don't anymore because those jobs have been sucked out of the United States. They've been ripped from the economies of small and medium-sized towns all over the country. And that money that used to be here in America is now redistributed all over the world to countries that do not like us, that do not like America, and that would rip America off every single time if they were allowed to. And they have been allowed to do that until now. It all changes now. So what Trump has done, and I get back to my main point, this is the most important day of Trump's 4+ years as president of the United States. Yesterday, that is. It is the most important piece of legislation he has signed. It isn't a piece of legislation, but it is the most important action he has taken in his time as president. Because he is trying, and again, whether or not he will be successful in doing so, I am not here to tell you this is all going to work perfectly. I am definitely not here to tell you that. But I am here to tell you I do give him tremendous, tremendous kudos for making the attempt. I give him tremendous praise for being bold enough to try and tackle this problem and for trying to stick up for the United States of America. It is about time America had a leader who renegotiates deals in favor of American citizens, not in favor of everybody else. Not just, oh, don't worry about it. Yeah, they get the better end of this, but don't worry about it. We just don't want to make any waves. No, let's make some huge tsunami waves, okay? Make the tsunami so big that America gains, because the wave is so humongous that the money flows right back into America instead of flowing out, which has been doing for decades now. For decades, Americans have been given the short end of the stick. The jobs go out, the opportunities go out, the money goes out, the money goes to Ukraine, the money goes to here, it goes to there. I don't even want to talk about some of the money some of the countries the money goes to, but we know it doesn't go to America. It doesn't go here. It goes everywhere else except for here. The American president and the American government has for decades put other nations first, not Americans first. They're thinking about the financiers all over the world instead of the workers, and instead of the citizens, and instead of the people here. The people in Ohio, the people in Michigan, the people in Wisconsin, the people in Tennessee, the people in Georgia. Those are the people the American government should be going to bat for. And I don't care if the stock market dropped 3,000 points, okay? And I am not going to sit here and listen to these leftists tell us, oh my gosh, look at what's happening to the stock market, when they were the ones who wanted to put Elizabeth Warren as president. They were the ones that wanted to put Bernie Sanders as president. Let's see how soaked Wall Street gets when you have someone you really want as president. All of a sudden now, all these liberals are in defense of the corporatist class. They are the ones who don't want this stuff. The corporate class doesn't want the tariffs, because the corporate class are the ones who have made out like bandits because of free trade, not fair trade, free trade. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not here to say, hey, they're bad, they shouldn't be making money. No, I'm a capitalist. I'm a free market guy. But let's have the free market be a little bit fair to America, and let's have the trade deals not always benefiting the other country and not us. Shouldn't our country have someone out there trying to negotiate deals on our behalf that should benefit us, and we freak out because one day the stock market crashes, half the people complaining about the stock market crash have zilch, zero money invested. The money they may have invested is in a 401k. They don't check the stock market. They could care less what goes on in the market. And now they act like the economy has crashed. He's sunk the economy because of one day. Yeah, I will admit an extremely bad day in the markets, but maybe a little short-term pain for long-term gain. How badly do you want to buy socks for $1.50? How badly do you want to be able to go to the dollar store and buy everything in there for one single dollar? Would you not trade having a good job, a well-paying job, to maybe pay a little bit more? Not the kind of inflation we've been seeing under Biden and all the craziness that we've seen at the grocery store and whatnot. I'm talking about this this economy that is based on everything needs to be cheap. That is what the value we have derived from free trade. So what we have now is we have millions of Americans now working two jobs, one at Walmart and one at McDonald's. Also, they can afford what, a pack of 8 pairs of socks for $5. Like, is that a good trade-off? I don't think it is. The economy has become based on cheap goods, on cheap consumerism, instead of an economy built on dignity, work, growth, sustainable economic growth. Half of the United States, if not more, has been royally screwed by the trade deals put in place by presidents and politicians for the last 30, 40 years. And Trump has come along and he said, sorry, guys, it's over. It's over. America cannot be a nation that builds nothing. It cannot be a nation of, have you seen that clip where it's like two millennial women and they're sitting by the pool and they're talking about, look at how amazing our jobs are. They're just like in their bikinis, like typing on their laptop. That's what the American economy is now. That's what it is. It's a bunch of WFH laptop jobs. And we trade all of that for what? To be able to buy, again, I always use socks as the example. To be able to go into Walmart and buy a bunch of crap that was made overseas doesn't seem like a good trade-off to me. People constantly complain about corporatism and all this and that. And then finally, they have someone who comes along and challenges the corporatist order, and they freak out at it. So anyway, no, what he's doing, he's doing exactly the right thing. And look, I don't know how they calculated all those numbers. I have no idea. I have no idea how he or how they figured out which countries to tariff and which countries not to. But directionally speaking, I agree with all of it. Do I know for sure that it's going to work? No. I don't know for sure that it's going to work. You know, it may be the case that the jobs are never coming back, no matter what you do. But I at least admire the president for attempting to bring them back. Will America get a good deal from every nation? I don't know. But I admire the president for trying to get a deal in the first place. Has the rollout been perfect? No. Has it been a little chaotic? Yes. But maybe a little chaotic is good. Maybe a little crazy is good. Maybe for once, everyone else should sweat and not us. Maybe for once, they should be afraid of what we are going to do. It would be nice to have America. Everyone says, oh, well, when Obama was president, America was liked. And then you hear Republicans say, when Reagan was president, America was respected. How about we have a president who makes America feared? Feared. That's what it should be like. They should be begging Trump to make a deal. They should come desperately pleading for a deal. They should come whimpering, please, Mr. President, let's make a deal. And I can only hope that that is what's going to happen. But again, anyone who tells you they know what's going to happen, they definitely do not know what's going to happen. They have no clue what's going to happen. All right, that's that. I know I got a little bit heated there, maybe a little bit too intense, but look, it's an intense topic. So do I support the tariffs? Yes, I do. I support what he's doing. 100%. I support him. I want to go back to Bill Ackman's Twitter page here, X page. I have to remember not to call it Twitter anymore. Sorry to Elon for that, but I'm going to try and make this centered as well. It's not. There we go. Okay, let's go. Let's see if we can pull it up again. This is an article looks like from Fortune magazine, November 10th, 2003. This is by Warren Buffett. Now, Bill Ackman posted this. It's titled, America's Growing Trade Deficit is Selling the Nation Out from Under Us. Here's a way to fix the problem, and we need to do it now. I'm about to deliver a warning regarding the U.S. trade deficit and also suggest a remedy for the problem. But first, I need to mention 2 reasons you might want to be skeptical about what I say. To begin, my forecasting record with respect to macroeconomics is far from inspiring. For example, over the past 2 decades, I was excessively. More to the point at hand, I started way back in 1987 to publicly worry about our mounting trade deficits. And as you know, we've not only survived, but also thrived. So on the trade front, score at least 1 wolf for me. Nevertheless, I am crying wolf once again. See if we can read the rest of it here. See what he says here. Through the spring of 2002, I had lived nearly 72 years without purchasing a foreign currency. Since then, Berkshire has made significant investments in and today holds several currencies. I won't give you particulars. In fact, it is largely irrelevant which currencies they are. What does matter is the underlying point. To hold other currencies is to believe that the dollar will decline. Both as an American and as an investor, I actually hope these commitments prove to be a mistake. Any profits Berkshire might make from currency trading would pale against the losses the company and our shareholders in other aspects of their lives would incur from a plunging dollar. But as the head of Berkshire, I am in charge of investing its money in ways that make sense. And my reason for finally putting my money where my mouth has been so long is that our trade deficit has greatly worsened to the point that our country's net worth, so to speak, is now being transformed abroad at an alarming rate. Transferred abroad at an alarming rate. Very important correction there. A perpetuation of this transfer will lead to major trouble. To understand why, take a wildly fanciful trip with me to two isolated side-by-side islands of equal size, Squanderville and Thriftville. Land is the only capital asset on these islands, and their communities are primitive, needing only food and producing only food. Working 8 hours a day, in fact, each inhabitant can produce enough food to sustain himself or herself. And for a long time, that's how things go along. On each island, everyone works for the prescribed 8 hours a day, which means that society is self-sufficient. Eventually, though, the industrious citizens of Thriftville decide to do some serious saving and investing. And they start to work 16 hours a day. In this mode, they continue to live off the food they produce in 8 hours of work, but begin exporting an equal amount of their one and only trading outlet, Squanderville. The citizens of Squanderville are ecstatic about this turn of events, since they can now live their lives free from toil, but eat as well as ever. Oh yes, there's a quid pro quo, but to the squanderers it seems harmless. All that the thrifts want in exchange for their food is squander bonds, which are denominated naturally in squander bucks. So he's essentially here, writing a metaphor for what's going on with the United States trade problem. So Warren Buffett was sounding the alarm to this problem a long time ago, clearly. Let's see what else. Oh, here's a clip of Obama. One second here. This is a clip of Obama when he was running for president. Let's see if we can watch this here.
We can't keep passing unfair trade deals like NAFTA that put special interests over workers' interests. And it's because of this long-standing commitment to working families that I will not sign any trade agreement as president that does not have protections for our environment and protections for American workers.
NAFTA needs to be amended. And I've already said that I would contact the president of Mexico and the prime minister of Canada to make sure that the labor and environmental agreements are actually enforceable in the same way that patent protections and other things that are important to corporate America are enforceable.
Point number 2 on trade. John is exactly right that you travel around South Carolina and you see the textile mills that John's father worked in, closed all over the region. And it is absolutely true that NAFTA was a mistake. I know that Hillary, on occasion, has said that this was just last year, said this was a boon to the economy. I think it has been devastating because our trade agreements did not have labor standards and environmental standards that would assure that workers in the U.S. were getting a square deal. And it is absolutely critical for us to understand that NAFTA was an enormous problem. The permanent trade relations with China, without some of the enforcement mechanisms that were in there that you voted for, was also a significant problem. And we've got to all move forward as Democrats to make sure that we've got trade deals that work for working people and not just for corporate profits.
Before we turn the questioning over to Tim Russert, Senator Obama.
Well, wait, was it not playing? I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I thought it was playing, but it was not. 1 second.
We can't keep passing unfair trade deals like NAFTA that put special interests over workers' interests. And it's because of this long-standing commitment to working families that I will not sign any trade agreement as president that does not have protections for our environment and protections for American workers.
NAFTA needs to be amended. And I've already said that I would contact the president of Mexico and the prime minister of Canada to make sure that the labor and environmental agreements are actually enforceable in the same way that patent protections and other things that are important to corporate America are enforceable.
Point number 2 on trade. John is exactly right that you travel around South Carolina and you see the textile mills that John's father worked in, closed all over the region. And it is absolutely true that NAFTA was a mistake. I know that Hillary, on occasion, has said that this was just last year, said this was a boon to the economy. I think it has been devastating because our trade agreements did not have labor standards and environmental standards that would assure that workers in the U.S. were getting a square deal. And it is absolutely critical for us to understand that NAFTA was an enormous problem. The permanent trade relations with China, without some of the enforcement mechanisms that were in there, that you voted for, was also a significant problem. And we've got to all move forward as Democrats to make sure that we've got trade deals that work for working people and not just for corporate profits.
Before we turn the questioning over to Tim Russert, Senator Obama.
Well, I think that it is inaccurate for Senator Clinton to say that she's always opposed NAFTA. In her campaign for Senate, she said that NAFTA, on balance, had been good for New York and good for America. I disagree with it. I think that it did not have the labor standards and environmental standards that were required in order to not just be good for Wall Street, but also be good for Main Street. And if you travel through Youngstown and you travel through communities in my home state of Illinois, you will see entire cities that have been devastated as a consequence of trade agreements that were not adequately structured to make sure that U.S. workers had a fair deal. If trade agreements are written only with corporate profits and Wall Street in mind, and not with its possible effects on Main Street, then we're only seeing half of the equation, and we've got to take those into account.
But what I refuse to accept is that we have to sign trade deals like the South Korea agreement that are bad for American workers. What I oppose and what I will always oppose are trade deals that put the interests of Wall Street ahead of the interests of American workers. That's why I oppose NAFTA. That's why I voted against CAFTA. That's why it didn't make sense to normalize trade relations with China without asking more from China. I will oppose the Colombia Free Trade Agreement if George Bush is insistent on sending it to Congress, because the violence against unions in Colombia would make a mockery of the very labor protections that we've insisted be included in these kinds of agreements. You can trust me when I say that whenever trade deals we negotiate come to my desk, they are going to be good for American workers, that they'll have powerful labor and environmental protections, and that we will enforce those protections. These are the battles we should be fighting.
You scrap NAFTA, Senator Obama, or fix it?
I would immediately call the president of Mexico, the president of Canada, to try to amend NAFTA, because I think that we can get labor agreements in that agreement right now. And it should reflect the basic principle that our trade agreements should not just be good for Wall Street, it should also be good for Main Street. And the problem that we've had is that we've had corporate lobbyists oftentimes involved in negotiating these trade agreements, but the AFL-CIO hasn't been involved. Ordinary working people have not been involved. And we've got to make sure that our agreements are good for everybody, because globalization right now is creating winners and losers. But the problem is it's the same winners and the same losers each and every time.
This is the same person who spent a decade with her husband campaigning for NAFTA, and now goes around saying how she was opposed to NAFTA. Does that sound like she's in touch with Pennsylvania? Does that sound like she's in touch with you?
And there you have it. That's how he won. That's how he won. Because people are tired of being ripped off. And now we have to act like this is an idea that Trump came up with overnight. All right. Put that back in. So anyway, I think that's all. That's all for tonight. But I told you that whenever there was something big going on, that I would make sure to be on here to discuss it, and I have done that. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button right here. I will be posting the best clips from the show on my YouTube Shorts, and I will soon be posting all this stuff on TikTok, because I think as long as TikTok's still around. So that's all. That's all for tonight. Good job by President Trump. Bold, ambitious, and promises made, promises kept. This is what he ran on. This is what he ran on in 2016. This is what he ran on to a lesser extent in 2020. But it's good to see he's finally delivering on it. Okay, thank you, and I will see you when I see you. God bless.